To you, and glad that you are here for our time to share about our amazing experience. And Brenda and I were talking in the office this week about it was really hard to put this presentation together because there was so much to want to include and so many pictures. And so you'll get a hint of what we experienced, but I think everyone discovered an amazing opportunity to both connect with each other and to be inspired by Paul and to grow in our faith. So we had a wonderful group that really meshed well together and just a fantastic experience. And it was a real privilege and an honor to be able to share this together. And so we're looking forward to sharing it with you. Some of our group members are here. Some could not be, but you never pick the perfect date always. And we also had a few people, which we'll introduce later on, from other congregations who joined us. And so we'll share a little bit about them too. Let's begin with a prayer and then we can get started. The Lord be with you.
And also with you.
Good and gracious God, we give you thanks for the witness of Paul, who courageously and boldly shared the good news of your way in the world through Jesus, of offering freedom and life and community and purpose to all people. As God, you inspired Paul to journey to the known world, creating followers in the way of Christ, reminding each person that they mattered and that they made a difference to you. Help us to embody that the same way in this community as we seek to follow in the way of Christ and to be your people, freed by grace and empowered with your vision for love and service to the world. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, I'm going to start by having our group who's here introduce themselves. So just go ahead and share your name and pass the microphone along, and you'll get to see sort of who our group was, and hopefully each of them will share more as we go through too.
Hello, I'm Brenda Goebel.
Nan Thompson.
Mark Thompson.
Cheryl Kroll.
Danielle Lawson.
Kent Lawson.
Vince Perkins.
And I think that's, Cheryl? Oh, you came up. Yeah, okay. You're moving seats so quickly. All right, good. All right. Well, I'll give a little bit of orientation first before we get too far into the tour. A reminder, some of you may remember originally this was going to be a trip to the Holy Land, and after October 7th and the war that's been raging there, we had to obviously rethink that, and the tour company that we were working with, Elias Tours, is owned by a Palestinian from Bethlehem who's a US citizen now, and he allowed us to change our itinerary and encouraged us to think about considering that. I think half of the original group continued, and we recruited probably 2/3 again more when we changed the itinerary to this experience. And it was a wonderful experience that we were able to do. We still think about and pray for certainly the people in Palestine and Gaza as they suffer, and in Israel right now. And want to continue to walk with them. But this was a very meaningful experience. And we already introduced our group, but Brenda, do you want to pass the microphone down? We have two more people who came with us. Could you just say your names to introduce yourselves to the group?
Nan Wild.
Thank you.
Jeff Wild, late as usual.
Actually, I will say our group was really good about being on time for getting to the bus or getting to wherever we needed to be, which makes group travel so much easier. So this is a highlight of the places we visited. We really followed Paul's, what you'll see in a Bible map or somewhere else, his second and third missionary journeys, So he started in Tarsus is where he lived, which is, if you could extend Turkey over to this area, or Asia Minor is where Paul was from, and then he was in Jerusalem and Syria and Arabia, and then came back through Asia Minor. This is the area where the churches of Galatians are, and then took a boat to Philippi, and we'll see that, and then traveled on to Thessaloniki, Berea, Athens, Corinth, and then took a ship back to Ephesus, and then spent some time here, and he did the whole thing again. And then at the end, he went to Jerusalem, where he was arrested and taken by the Roman authorities to Rome, where he died. And we don't know exactly what happened at the end of his life, but we do know that he made it to Rome, which was one of his goals too. So these are the main places that we spent. You can see most of the time is in Greece, with 1 day in Turkey and Ephesus. We also visited some of these islands in the archipelago that we'll talk about in a little bit too. But I think it really gave us a great taste of the journeys of Paul, and I think we were amazed at how far he traveled when it seemed like, on a bus, it took a while for us. We were ready to get off the bus when we were to our next spot, and he had to do this on foot or on ship. And so it really opened our eyes, I think, to the endurance and challenges that he experienced. So this is Kavala, and Joe Johnson, who's not here today, is shared this picture as one of his meaningful sights from the tour. Kavala is the city that you see down in the distance, and that would have been the first spot Paul landed in Europe. So that was where he came across from Turkey into Europe. You see the road here that you can still see the stones of down in the lower left corner of the picture. That's the Via Egnatia, one of the ancient Roman pathways that Paul probably would have walked from Kavala into Philippi, which is where we'll visit next. And most of the cities, I think Thessaloniki maybe is one of the exceptions, were built inland. So there wasn't really much at Kavala when Paul arrived here. He journeyed inland to Philippi, which was one of the major cities, and that was for protection in ancient times. Pirates and marauders would come by sea, and so if you had your city built inland, like Athens and Corinth and Philippi and some of the places we'll visit, you were protected. And so that's why many of the places that we saw were just off of the coast. All right, I'm going to move us on. So here's Philippi. This was the first major archaeological site we visited, and a number of you shared some thoughts about Philippi. So I'm wondering, as we arrived in this spot, does anyone from our group want to share a thought about this experience in Philippi?
Actually, Philippi was one of my favorites because of Lydia being the first European Christian and a woman. And so
You're wearing purple in honor of Lydia, maybe
well,
today,
yes,
Cheryl,
and
right?
also of where we went when we were in Santorini. And so I really liked being in Philippi. And we also were reaffirmed our baptism with Blake at the river. And of course, I came back with a little souvenir that forever imprinted on my wrist of a seashell with the droplets of water symbolizing baptism, because also I was with Blake in 2015 in the Holy Land. So where we reaffirmed our baptism in the River Jordan. And then, of course, my original baptism back in August of 1951. So I came back with a little souvenir on my arm.
Thank you, Cheryl. That is wonderful. And it was really meaningful. And I've got a couple pictures of that as well coming up. Brenda, do you want to share anything about that picture?
No.
Okay.
No, I could. I wish we had the picture of the inside too. So this was where Paul was actually imprisoned, and it's this little cubby hole inside of like a cave, and I pictured you wouldn't be able to stand upright in there. It was much smaller than I had envisioned. So that's me kind of showing that off.
Yeah, and so his first stop in Europe, Paul was imprisoned for the first of many times. This happened according to the scriptures and Acts, where he healed a girl who was prophesying and making money for her owners. She was a slave, and then when he healed her, she no longer made money for them, and so they threw Paul and Silas and Timothy in jail. Eventually, they had a amazing experience of an an earthquake, and the jail doors came open, and then they baptized the leaders of the jailer, and it was really an amazing experience there. So that's a very important spot in the expansion of Christianity. And then from there, Paul and his group went to Thessaloniki. But before they did that, I'll show you a little bit of what Cheryl was talking about. So here's, while they were in prison, a little bit of that story where the sort of earthquake happened and they were all freed, but they didn't escape, they stayed. And then the jailer said, "Why did you stay? What is happening? Will I be killed for letting you free?" And Paul and Silas said, "Believe in Jesus and you'll be saved." And so his whole family was baptized, and the Christian church, the first in Europe, became founded in Philippi. Here you can see the ancient site. So we started, you saw the picture of the theater and the jail there, and then the ancient town, and then around the corner of the mountain, you see this traditional site of Lydia's baptism. Philippi, there was no synagogue, and Paul would often originally go to the synagogues to begin his teaching about Jesus. He really viewed Jesus as a continuation of his Jewish faith. It wasn't a break. It wasn't something separate. When we talk about Paul on the road to Damascus, many of you know that story where he is out to persecute the Christians, and he all of a sudden has this experience of being blinded, and the Lord Jesus appears to him. We often say that's the conversion of St. Paul, but most biblical scholars, and I would really agree, say it's actually not a conversion, but the revelation for Paul of God's new way of acting in the world through Jesus. It's not a change of religion, it's not a change of course, but it's a new way of understanding how God is at work in the world through the continuation of what God had already done. And so on the western edge here, where it says the site of Lydia's baptism was, there was a waterway, and it said that women would gather there who were Jewish, because there was no synagogue, and they would pray there. And so Paul met them, and then they were baptized, including Lydia, who was a wealthy woman who ran a business dyeing purple cloth, which was sort of a special kind of a dye. And so here you see us at the shrine that was built over the river, where we could reenact our baptisms, remember that promise that we are God's beloved children. And imagine this was the first place where there was a European Christian in all the world, in all of history. And so that was something special. The left picture was sent by Dale Miller and his daughter Sarah, who was on the trip, and his daughter Wendy. And Sarah wrote, "Make sure if you ever go to Greece, you stretch your neck muscles beforehand," because there were so many paintings and icons on the rooftops of all of the churches and shrines we visited. And so this was the church that was adjacent to the waterway where we celebrated Lydia's baptism. And here you can see what we were all looking at. And that's just one sample of some of the amazing images sharing the life of Jesus and the scriptures to make them come alive in these bright and vibrant ways, and very traditional Greek Orthodox artwork. So anyone else want to share anything about the site and the baptism of Lydia and Philippi? Mark? Yeah.
But yeah, I submitted a picture on that because it was very moving to be on a site, of that baptism. And this is something somebody did consciously versus when we were baptized as infants. And so, we have our affirmation at confirmation, but it was very poignant for me to just be there and to contemplate that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I felt like it was a really meaningful time for our group too. It was maybe our second day of the trip, really, the first full day, and we were able to come together and remember our baptisms and our common identity. And really, I think that really helped bring us together for the trip as a foundational part of why we were there and who we were on this journey together. Yeah. So the next stop was Thessaloniki or Thessalonica. Paul went there, and there was a synagogue there, which is where he began to teach about Jesus and share about Christ's death and resurrection, and there was a church community of the way followed there as well. But again, Paul met with resistance. He was dragged by a mob and eventually sort of had to sneak out of town at night. And so this is sort of common for Paul during his time. He would have success, but also he would have an adversary or a difficulty. And it's amazing how he continued with such vigor and energy despite all of the setbacks that I think I certainly would have given up on if that happened here at Midvale. I don't know. That would be a big challenge if we would have a start and a stop. And so the next place that let's see, we went was Thessaloniki. This was the second largest city in Greece, and I didn't know much about it, but I really loved being in Thessaloniki. You can see it's a beautiful setting. The picture on the left, you can see over the sea, the bay, across the waters to Mount Olympus with the snow-capped peaks. And then on the right side, you see the Church of St. Demetrios, which is one of the oldest Christian churches in the world. It was originally built in the 300s or 400s. It burned and was rebuilt again in the 600s and 700s. This picture shows some of the newer mosaics and then some of the mosaics that date back over 1,000 years, or paintings, excuse me, that date back over 1,000 years. St. Demetrios was martyred by the Roman Empire and is viewed as sort of the patron saint of Thessaloniki. They built the church over the site of an old Roman temple and Roman baths and created a strong Christian heritage and community there from the earliest, Christian times. You can see the waterfront harbor down on the lower picture as well. It was just a beautiful, fun place to be. And it was a strange mixture of so many old churches and old sites with the modern city and the day-to-day life. It was, you never knew when you turned around a corner if you'd see a modern-looking street scene or a rubble of bricks and rocks. It was a great spot. Anyone want to share anything about Thessaloniki? Yeah, they are. Okay.
Thessaloniki was my favorite city that we visited, just from a cultural perspective. The food was fantastic. I went in a day earlier than the rest of the group, so I went on an actual food tour and got to try all kinds of fresh seafood and spices and things that I was less accustomed to. So I really enjoyed my experience in Thessaloniki. And also, like Blake said, just this idea that you're walking down and it's modern skyscrapers, and then here's an archaeological find just dug up, waiting there for you to enjoy. So that was really, I'd never been to a place quite like that before.
Thanks, Brenda. And Brenda and I had our own adventure of being lost one night. We were trying to get back to the hotel, and I thought I knew where the bus was, and it didn't come. And we eventually, it was, yeah, we made it home safely. So. Mm-hmm. After Thessaloniki, we journeyed to Berea, and there is a beautiful shrine built to Paul in Berea. This was another place where a Christian community was formed. We don't hear a lot about it because there was no book of the Bible named after it, but it was a very important site for the early church as well. And so this is our group gathered in front of the shrine to Paul, and a statue of Paul with some followers of Paul over there who are a very lovely part of our group. And so it was really amazing to see, and they believed that there were some stones and pathways here that dated back to Paul's time, that in the center of the city. And we encountered that many places, in Philippi and here and in Thessaloniki. I guess I didn't have a picture of it, of the marketplace, where we know from the Bible that Paul would have been in this spot and taught, and he often, in addition to the synagogues where he would appeal to a Jewish audience who had certain connections with his own understanding of faith and the scriptures and the Torah, and he would seek to build on that. And then he would go to the marketplaces where there were more Gentile or Roman citizens, and then appeal to them in a different way. And people probably think he had his stump speeches that would appeal to each audience depending on where he was, so that he would make a connection and help to them to see the good news that came through Jesus. And so it is a remarkable experience to think about the different people that he appealed to and how the communities that Paul created in these various churches were really diverse communities of men and women, of wealthy people like Lydia, of former slaves like Onesimus and others. And so it was a real up and down the social strata and across different boundaries of people who came together in the very early church. And I think that's really modeled after what Jesus did in his ministry. Anything about Berea for anyone? That was sort of a quick stop. We just had sort of a quick stop and a coffee there on our way. Although did anyone want to talk about the gas station rest stop areas? Okay, yeah.
My wife wants to talk about the bathroom for a second.
No, I don't.
No. Someone said that the rest stops and the gas stations that we stopped at were much nicer than in the U.S. They had this whole wide array of things you could buy, candies, books, fresh espresso, and local delicacies, and of course lots of bathrooms. And we always were on the hunt to make sure we could find one where there weren't a lot of other tour buses, so that we wouldn't have to wait in line too long. And we were there in a good time. It wasn't certainly the high season by any means, and so it wasn't crowded. It was a great time to be there. The weather was a lot like actually today. It was 70s for highs and 50s and 60s for lows. We had sunny skies every day, so it was picture perfect in that way in terms of the weather on our tour. From Berea, we drove down towards Athens. Paul would have gotten on to the coast and sailed to Athens, but it was more convenient and more interesting for us to take the bus at this point. And we could stop at a few places along the way. And one of the places that is really special is these monasteries at Meteora. And there's maybe a dozen or so monasteries, about half of which are still active, that date back to around 1000 to 1300 AD, and the height of what would have been the Byzantine Church era in this part of the world, the Byzantine or Eastern Orthodox Church. When the Western Church from Rome split from the Eastern Church, the Eastern Orthodox churches, which would be like Greek Orthodox and other Orthodox faiths, all centered around Constantinople. And so here was a center of sort of scholarly and monastic life. And you can see the dramatic ways in which they built the monasteries to sort of separate themselves and give them these amazing views. You can see the monasteries built on the cliffs, and we visited one of the monasteries while we were there and got to tour it and see the artwork. Sarah and Wendy and their dad Dale, who aren't able to be here with us, said how special it was to take the trip as a family, that it was really meaningful for them, and that was a really important part of this journey, is to take it together as the three of them. And so that was really special. When you're traveling, as Kent mentioned, you always need to know where the water closet is or the bathroom. And sometimes you don't quite know what to expect when you see the signs like this one, where there's a water closet and a panoramic view. Now, are they together or are they separate? So we did have to find out, and they were separate, we discovered. But yeah, so the different signs you experience when you're traveling and people trying to put things into English or for tourists to understand can be really fascinating. And we had a great lunch with that view where the picture of Mark and Nan is. Anyone want to share anything about the monasteries that we visited?
This was one of the highlights of the trip for me. If I recall correctly, there were about 7 monasteries that you can see from there. And what really struck me was, and throughout each of the other locations as well, because the temples and the cities were built in what appeared to be pretty remote areas. And to have that built back then was really amazing to me. I mean, we have a beautiful facility here, which we all drove our nice cars, parked in the parking lot, or walked to church, or biked to church, and walked in. These folks, just the effort alone to build it, and then to be there. There was a cable car that would take supplies from over to one of the monasteries. So that really struck me.
Yeah, and we were able to take the bus a lot of the way, but many of them, and for many decades, centuries, they had to walk up, steps that were cut into the mountaintops to get to these places, and they were isolated, and they were able to be kept in the way they were even after the Ottoman Empire invaded and the predominant culture became Muslim. These monasteries held on to their identity and their Christian faith in the central part of Greece and continue now to this day. So the next stop in the same area in Meteora was to an icon workshop. Icons are one of the main visible signs of faith for the Orthodox Church. You'll see many, many icons in every church that you go into. Behind, in the front area where the chancel area would be, but also as you enter into the doorways, there'll be icons of maybe Christ or a patron saint or another thing. And so they're used as devotional and prayer practices, and people will come and offer a prayer and light a candle and make a donation just on their daily lives as they're walking by the churches. That's part of their regular habit and devotion. And they look at the icon and are encouraged to imagine that person or the story and put themselves into that experience and say, how does this teach me or help me to live my life this day? And so we went to an icon workshop in Meteora, and we saw the whole process really of how the icons were made. The top right picture is them creating the wood that the icons will be painted on, and it's harvested from local timber. And so you can see the wood shop, and then in the left couple of pictures you see Father Pefkis, who was the head of the workshop, creating a couple of the icons, along with his wife also did much of the painting. The man in the red shirt who's pointing, he was actually very friendly. He doesn't look quite as friendly in that picture. I'm sorry, but he was just pointing out something at the wood shop was their son, and some others worked in the icon workshop as well. And you can see the easel where he makes the paints, and all the different paints were all made. The colorings, and many were made from local natural ingredients and combined with different oils and egg to create the colors, and then real gold leaf is made on all of them. What else do I want to say about? The Father Pefkis is actually a pretty famous iconographer. He has had his icons purchased by the Vatican and other places as well. And so we were really glad to visit that. And we didn't even necessarily actually know we were going to be visiting this place, but we were so inspired that many people bought little icons to take home as a memory and maybe a spiritual practice for us as we come and return home. Does anyone want to share, I guess, anything about the icon workshop or the icon, if any of you purchased one, Nan? Yeah.
Jeff purchased a very small icon that Brenda and I both purchased of Jesus in the boat, and peace be still is the verse. And I have it right on my desk next to my computer as a way to remember frequently of our trip. But I was struck by when we got to this place where Father Pepkis has his workshop, it was above an auto repair store. And it was like, where are we going? So it was like, okay, well, we'll just go with this, right? And the sense of family, just this family, now 3 generations, having this particular ministry. I saw it as a ministry of exercising their gifts, and I'm really glad we made the stop. And we brought one back.
Yeah, we got an icon for Midvale of Paul, of the traditional image of Paul, and I think I'm holding it here, but if you want to see it, it's up in the gathering space on the welcome table, and you can see Father Pefkis. This is actually, that middle picture is him signing the back of the icon with a commemoration for us and our group. So the icons were already made, but then those of us who received them or purchased them while we were there, he would create a image and a note on the back for us, which was really special. So go up after we're done and make sure you look at the welcome table in the gathering space and see the icon of Paul that is now resides here at Midvale to remember that special time. Danielle? Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to add that I wasn't that familiar with iconography before we had been here. And after having been to a few of the churches and craning my neck up to look at the beautiful paintings on the ceilings, that really that's what those were, was just the larger versions of the iconography. And I don't know why it hadn't struck me before, but it was impactful to hear our guide tell like an entire Bible story around one of the icons. And as she described it, I was like, oh, yes, I see that now. I get it. And it kind of also makes me think of the stained glass that we have a lot that we see here. And so now I'm kind of paying closer attention to what those symbols and, you know, what those stories are.
Thanks, Danielle. That's really great. Yeah, and it helps us look at things that are around us every day in our church or other places with new eyes too. That's part of I think the gift of traveling and of seeing different expressions of faith or different ways of doing things. Then when we come home, we take that with us, but we also see our own surroundings and the own stories that we have in new ways, and that's a real gift to us. We did eat fairly well on the trip, I would say. So these are just a few pictures of some of the things that we were able to enjoy. It wasn't like we were, doing one of the pilgrimages where we were walking on our knees the whole time and sleeping on wooden boards. We had nice hotel accommodations. We had wonderful food. The top left is reflection of many of the hotel buffets that we would eat dinner at each night. Just wonderful spreads of various local foods, but then they would usually also have a few more, American or other foods for people who needed a taste of home. On the top right, Danielle, what is that called again? Moussaka, yes, that was a favorite of many of us. It was a baked cheese and eggplant dish that was just delicious. We had fresh fish from the sea, souvlaki in the lower left. We were disappointed that almost everywhere we came, not really, but it came as a deconstructed pita instead of a constructed one. So we had to wait. I think Vince had to wait till he came back home to get the pita that he could hold in his hand rather than the ones that were presented more of a platter style. So, and then on the lower left is ouzo, which is a traditional Greek anise liqueur that we sampled one night. And so we had wonderful tastes that helped us understand and experience the culture and really enjoy time together. And this is just a small sample. Anyone else want to share a favorite food or a favorite dining experience? The honey. Kalambaka was the hotel we stayed at outside of Meteora. It was a little bit more in the country, but you can see it was a beautiful setting, and all of our accommodations were just really wonderful and fine. And so we had a great experience that way too. This is our guide, Zena, who actually was from Thessaloniki, and that's the t-shirt we gave her as a gift from Wisconsin with love. And she actually, does anyone want to share her reaction when she received it?
The first thing she said is, I'm never going to wear this because my son's going to take it. And the next morning
Yeah.
she said he got it.
I wasn't aware that there was that picture that she ever put it on. So that was good that she was able to wear it.
Yeah, she wore it. She wore it the one night for dinner, and then I don't know if she ever got it back. But we also gave one to our other Greek guide on the cruise ship, and they both were a little overwhelmed because Giannis Antetokounmpo, of course, from the Milwaukee Bucks, was the NBA MVP, and the Bucks won the NBA championships a couple years ago. Is from Greece, originally from Nigeria, and his family fled as immigrants to Greece, and he grew up there, and they love him, and they were just really flattered that we would think of them with these mementos of Wisconsin. So that was a fun way to sort of share our thanks in a sort of interesting opportunity. So we did have a few other people join us on the tour after we changed the itinerary and opened it up to some others. So I will introduce you to a few of these people. In the top right is Rebecca Stell, who's a pastor in Maryland at Grace Lutheran Church, just outside of the DC area. And I've actually known Becca since college. We went to St. Olaf and Luther Seminary and worked at camp together. So she's been a really long time, wonderful friend to me. And she decided she would love to go on a trip like this and saw on Facebook or somewhere that I was leading a group and reached out and said, could I join you? And then she signed up and then she said, I feel a little guilty joining you if I don't invite my church to come along. Can I bring see if anyone from my church wants to go too? So she did. So there were 5 people from her church who are in this lower picture. Actually 4 from her church and a sibling who joined us as well from the DC area, and they were wonderful to get to know. It was nice to have a group that had people from different places because we all knew we didn't know everyone, and it sort of helped us to be open and more engaged with each other, I think. And then we had 2 other people who literally just found this on the internet and reached out to me and said, what do you think if we joined your group? So the middle picture is Paul Ortiz and Kim, who are from Seattle. He's a Methodist pastor there in the Seattle area. And then Sam Morenga, who is an Episcopal priest in the Philadelphia area, who joined us as well. So it was really fun to have their perspectives and their time. Yeah.
The poor guy on the left his wallet in an Uber car,
And
his
phone.
iPhone. He had absolutely nothing with him.
Yeah, he was sort of stressed the first couple of days, and so we were all taking pictures of him for him that he could send and keep because he had no way to take photos.
Actually, it wasn't an iPhone, and he said my next one will be because he said it would have been so easy to get all his data back. And he
Oh
was
yeah,
having a
right. It
real
was
problem
yeah,
with
and he
that,
could.
yeah.
So, but he was great to have, and he took it in stride after the first day. Realized he wasn't going to get it back, and just entered into the experience with us. So, yeah, he had a great personality, very outgoing, and just terrific to have. So that was the others in our group. After Meteora, we went down to Delphi, the Oomphaloomphos, the belly button of the world, according to the ancient Greek understanding, sort of the center of the known world, where there was this oracle, where all of the leaders would go to seek guidance and wisdom, and it was a large rural area with this amazing archaeological site. And then a lot of the main pieces had been preserved and brought into an indoor museum so that they wouldn't get deteriorated more. But it was just a stunning location. And to imagine people from Athens or Corinth or everywhere coming to this spot to think about getting advice from the Temple of Apollo and others, the oracle there. And it was a real contrast to our learning about Paul. And that's one of the things I liked about visiting this, is that in the Greek understanding, the gods were very fickle and capricious and didn't really have any morals, or you couldn't trust them, and they would only do things for you if you made enough offerings and sacrifices and did the right things. And it was completely opposite to the God that Paul was sharing in Jesus, who came and was faithful, which we'll hear in Leviticus today in worship. Great is thy faithfulness, who sought to bless us out of grace and mercy and love, not out of our having to somehow earn it when we didn't know how to earn it, which is what the Greeks, they didn't necessarily know what the right offerings were. And so it was just very contrasting to think about the ancient Greek understanding of the universe versus Paul's preaching about Jesus. And yeah, Danielle, you're bringing me.
Really, what I didn't mean to interrupt. You were
No,
going
please.
on a roll there,
Yeah.
but to kind of add on what Pastor Blake is saying, I hadn't realized that there was almost an entire economy built around the Greek gods, where they would sell, the figures and all the offerings and things. And then for Paul to come in there and say, well, that's not really what you should be doing. It then is where I realized and understood why he was put in jail and why he was persecuted and in trouble and having to flee all the time. He was really a major disruptor and needed, you know, when he finally had people that would follow him, that was, you know, he considered that the success.
Yeah, I think Jeff brought this up to me, and I was just how Paul really turned the economy and the social strata upside down and created a totally different vision where it wasn't based on your wealth or your meritocracy or some unknown thing, but it was really based on all people being valued and worthy and equal. And it was really beautiful to think about that and what Paul preached and taught. We made it to Athens. You can see in the lower left, there's a map. The Acropolis is the high city that most ancient Greek cities had as a place of protection, but also where their temples were. You see to the left of that is the Areopagus, or Mars Hill, which is where we are, where Paul gave a famous sermon about Jesus saying to the Athenians, you have this temple to an unknown God, but this is a God that I know and wants you to know as who it is as well. And he talked about Jesus. You see the Agora below that. So the Areopagus was right between the Acropolis and the Agora, which was the marketplace where Paul preached. Our hotel was within walking distance of all that, so it was a great spot. This was a really meaningful place to be, to imagine Paul, you know, defending his teaching and his faith. And you can see the Acropolis behind us there, and then down below would be the marketplace where he walked and taught many times too. I'm going to jump ahead a little bit. Here's another picture, some other pictures of Athens up from on the Acropolis. That's the Temple of Artemis, I believe, with the Katydid statues. This is the view from the rooftop of our hotel back towards the Parthenon and the Acropolis. Joe's not here, but one of his quests is always to find different flavored snack foods wherever he goes. So that was his favorite from the trip that he sent a picture of. What were they? Basil ruffles, I think, or something, or oregano ruffles. I can't. Yeah. Then we sailed across to Ephesus, which was an incredible center of the old ancient world and also became an important center of the Christian church. We had an opportunity to have a devotion there. Does anyone want to explain the symbol here? Anyone want to?
Okay, I think I just got volunteered to explain that because I also brought home a permanent souvenir on my arm. So our guide in Ephesus showed us this symbol that had been carved into, it was in the road, actually, that one, where we were walking on these marble stones. But they would also put it, you know, maybe I think on like a lintel or something above your home. And it was a symbol with the Greek letters iota, chi, right?
Theta.
Theta, epsilon, sigma, right? And so what it meant was, oh geez, now I'm really blanking on the pressure.
Ichthys, which is the fish, which was this, but it also is the first initials of Jesus Christ.
Right. So it's Jesus Christ, Son of God and Savior, essentially, are what they mean. And so I did get that broken out on my arm with the letters. I didn't want it to look like a pizza on my arm.
So this circle contains all of those letters, that symbol. Yeah. Ephesus was an amazing archaeological site, and this is that main walkway where that symbol was carved into the stone, the marble. You can see the big amphitheater. This was a port, but when we were there, the port had silted in, and so it was actually several miles to the ocean. The Ephesus became abandoned maybe around 1000 AD once the port had sort of silted in, and they moved more over to the coasts. And that's why I think it was so well preserved, is because no one was there over that time. And then we did spend some time touring on a cruise ship in the Greek islands. Don't have to feel too sad for us. We went to Mykonos, Patmos, Rhodes, Crete, and Santorini, and each one was really beautiful and unique in its own way. Patmos is the island where John wrote the book of Revelation when he was for a while exiled because of the Roman persecution. And so this is the church that's built over the cave where he is said to have received that book of Revelation. Here's a mosaic of John dictating to the scribe what he is hearing in the Revelation. And so that was a beautiful spot, but all the islands were just stunning in their beauty, and just the beautiful white buildings, the blue sea, the green hillsides. You can see Santorini there on the left. On the right, some of us in Crete went on an excursion to the interior of the island and went to a farm and experienced some traditional Greek dancing and food, which was really delicious. Let's see. And then our last stop was, oh, yeah.
Those little tiny churches are built by families, and on the person who builds them birthday, they are open. They are closed the other 364 days a year, and they are all over the town.
Yeah, a lot of the churches, this is in Santorini and in Mykonos, families would build a church in Thanksgiving for a successful fishing season or their family returning safely or other things. And so, yeah, that's why you see so many churches in all of these communities. And there was always a church right at the harbor too, dedicated to the fishermen and those who would go out. Corinth was the last site we visited, and it was on an isthmus. It's another place of an isthmus, like Madison. And we went over a canal, and so it was a very important spot because it connected Athens to the Peloponnese Peninsula, and so it was a major route of trade. Here, we know Paul had a lot of interaction with the Corinthian church and wrote 3 letters, 2 of which we know are in the New Testament. That's, even though they're 1st and 2nd Corinthians, it's technically his 2nd and 3rd letters to the people there. And he talks a lot about how they need to live in community. This is where he shares the importance of inviting everyone to the table of the Eucharist. And so we shared communion here in Corinth together towards the end of our trip, which I found to be a really meaningful way to conclude our time together, to share in that body and blood of Christ that has been given for us for our life and salvation. Rebecca, who was my friend from college, who's the pastor, her great uncle is right here. This is a picture. He actually was an archaeologist in Greece. And so we saw that spot where he was working on the temple of, was it Athena in Corinth, I believe? Maybe it says in the next, yeah. So here's the current picture of it with Cheryl modeling for us so we can see the site. But so that was really a neat thing for her to remember and think about her family. There's us having communion. There's a stone of a menorah, so you know that there was a synagogue here where Paul would have preached, and we saw other spots where Paul was active here as well. So just neat to see those concrete connections with this past that seems sometimes so far away, but yet we have this evidence of it today. I think that might be the last picture. Yep, I think it is. So any last comments from anyone before we conclude? Any questions anyone has? We have maybe 2 minutes before we go to church. But I'm glad we could fit this in now rather than wait till the fall. It's still fresh in our memory, and we're really grateful to all of you to come and listen to us too. Any one or two questions? Anything? All good? Danielle, yeah.
I'll just add, some of you may have been on a group tour like this before, but in case anybody's wondering why we're all wearing these lanyards and things on our neck, and if you were interested in going, we always had earpieces that we could hear our guide telling us details about what we were looking at. So it wasn't like if you were in the back, you couldn't see or hear, you could always know what she was saying. It was so helpful. But they were very ubiquitous in all of our pictures.
And for those of you who haven't traveled with Pastor Blake, you have no idea what a gift you are to this group. And
you.
I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Well,
Amen.
yeah, thank you. It was my joy and really privileged, and I really appreciate the connection that we make on these tours and the energy and life we bring back. So yeah, thanks everyone. Enjoy your Sunday, and we'll see some of you in worship.